Good morning and welcome to our family caregiving webinar. My name is Carrie McClellan. I'm the Director of Outreach and Community Engagement for ElderHelp. And our speaker today will be Jean Alton with Alzheimer's San Diego. And I will do a formal introduction of her in just a couple of moments. So today's webinar topic is on driving and memory loss. And this is always a topic I feel like of interest for people, kind of a challenging topic that we often hear about from family caregivers, trying to have those conversations with family members who are starting to show signs and symptoms of dementia or memory loss. And so I know we're going to learn a lot today from Jean. Before I introduce her, though, I did want to just briefly mention about ElderHelp so that you're familiar with our organization if you are new to us. So our mission at ElderHelp is to provide personalized services and information to help seniors remain independent and live with dignity in their own homes. And we have been supporting seniors as well as family members in the San Diego community for over 50 years now. And so while we might provide direct services to older adults who are living in their homes, a lot of times we are communicating with their family members, or we have families who reach out for resources along the way. So we're definitely in communication with individuals as well as families. I wanted to just give a appreciation shout out to US Bank for sponsoring today's webinar. So we really appreciate their support. At ElderHelp, we have a variety of services that we offer. I'll just give you a brief overview. We offer our information and referral service to anybody who might be looking for resources. So even if you're not sure where to start, you can reach out to us, and we're always happy to point you in the right direction of what might be available for you or your loved one. We offer a variety of nutrition services, including grocery shopping, as well as a pantry delivery service. We offer transportation through our Seniors A Go-Go volunteer driving program. We offer care coordination and volunteer services in the homes with our clients. And then we offer a home share program, which is essentially a roommate matching service. And our family caregiver support program is where these webinars are through. And through that family caregiver support, we want to be able to help individuals who are caring for a loved one at any stage kind of understand that role and help with navigating that process. And sometimes that is just having a conversation about what resources are needed. Other times it's providing educational webinars and getting those out to folks, and that's what today is all about. We also have created online courses that are available on our website that are self-paced tutorials that there's no cost to access those. And if you're interested, it would just be going to our website and going to our family caregiver page, and you would have access to those. I do want to mention that we record all of our webinars, so you can find our webinar library on that same page with all of the previously recorded topics. And we're always grateful to partner with Alzheimer's San Diego, as so many family caregivers who reach out are caring for a loved one who is showing signs and symptoms of dementia or who already has a diagnosis. And so many of the topics that we cover, we do partner with Alzheimer's San Diego for their expertise. And so I'm happy to invite Jean today and to introduce her to you as our speaker. So let me just share a little bit. So Jean Alton has worked in the field of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias for over 30 years. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and in recreation therapy and is a certified positive approach to care dementia trainer. Jean's expertise is built upon her many years of experience working in a variety of settings, including memory care in facilities, adult social day programs, early memory loss programs, and care management. Jean is a senior dementia educator with Alzheimer's San Diego, where she provides community education and coordinates programs for people with early stage dementia. So Jean always has a wealth of information and knowledge to share. And so I look forward to hearing what she will pass along to all of us today. So thank you so much, Jean, for joining.
Well, thank you, Carrie, for the kind words, and good morning, everybody. So we've got lots to talk about here today, so let's just delve into it. So obviously we're talking about driving and memory loss. So our agenda for today, Carrie is my page turner here. We're going to start with how dementia affects driver safety. And we'll go on from there and talk about the signs of unsafe driving, working with your doctor and the DMV, and then some local resources for everyone to be aware of. So we'll start with driver safety.
And just as we continue along, if anybody has questions, please feel free to type them into the question pane and we will go through those at the end of the presentation. So feel free to type along as you have a question come up so that we can go through those at the end. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so we're very tied to our cars here certainly in Southern California, and all of us, I think, would have some hesitations or challenges or difficulties with the idea of having to give up the car keys, give up our own, independence to hop in the car and go wherever we want to go. But when we're dealing with diseases like dementia, we are talking about changes in the brain that are affecting the ability for people to have really good executive function, which is what we need in order to drive and drive safely. And so all of that executive function includes these things. The ability to, have memory and keep that, to be oriented as to where we are, to use good judgment and make snap decisions, to monitor our behavior. We all can get upset with traffic sometimes, and with people that drive too slow or drive too fast or whatever it is they're doing that is annoying us. But we, generally speaking, monitor our behavior. We don't usually go into, or at least I hope most of us don't go into the road rage, although some people do. Executive function also includes the sensory system, the ability to see well, to have good peripheral vision, and but also, the other senses too, to hear. When we hear a siren, then, we right away start looking to see, it's going to be an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car. Where is it? Is it behind me? Do I need to pull over to the right? And then the visual field clearly is a huge part of the ability to drive and drive safely. And all of these areas are being impacted by a dementia diagnosis. And so people are having memory loss. They are becoming disoriented as to where they are. Their judgment, ability to use good judgment and quick judgment is not working the way it used to. There can be more behaviors going on, and some of that might be because people are losing the ability to kind of filter and monitor behaviors. There's the sensory changes that are going on, and very much so a narrowing visual field that occurs in people with dementia. So clearly all these things have an impact on driving and the ability to drive safely. So we'll go to the next one. What we're going to talk about is some of the signs of unsafe driving that we will see over the course of time with people with dementia, and but also, just as a part of just kind of normal aging as well too, that some of our functioning ability is changing just with age. So some of the signs are, let's see if the page turner will, there we go. These are the things to just be on the alert for, watching for in people who you know and care about and are involved with that maybe have some kind of dementia, but it's also, I think, something for us to try and be aware of in ourselves as well too. So one of the things we see is decreased confidence. So people might be saying that they're not comfortable driving at night any longer, or they're not comfortable driving on the freeway anymore. They want to stick to their own neighborhood. Maybe there's some parking lots that just prove too challenging to navigate and park in. And so some of that decreased confidence is kind of some of the beginning signs of unsafe driving. Poor lane control is another one where we see people are doing a lot of drifting within their own lane, but oftentimes into other lanes as well too. And that's, again, something that we see also in people without dementia too. And sometimes it is related to people being on their phones when they shouldn't be, answering texts and so forth. But poor lane control is something to be on the alert for. Inappropriate speed is another one. And by and large, what we mean by inappropriate speed for people with dementia, people who are getting older, is they tend to drive slower rather than faster. So this might be a person who's chugging along on the freeway at 40 miles an hour, so not keeping up with traffic. So that, becomes an unsafe situation. Trouble navigating turns, starting to have the rear wheels are hitting the curb as a person is turning rather than, going around the curb without having the wheels hit it. And people are having trouble with that. Again, with regards to just kind of some behavior changes, we see people becoming more easily angered or confused or distracted. And all of these things affect driving and the ability to drive safe. Making poor decisions is another one. Judgment is affected by a diagnosis of dementia. And just as people with dementia become more, for example, vulnerable to, let's say, scams or, people with bad intentions, people with dementia can also, in a similar vein, just make poor decisions. That's that part of the brain here in the frontal lobe that allows us to quickly assess things and make a good decision about, am I going to pay this guy $30,000 to do a new roof for me, or does that sound kind of fishy? And likewise, we're making some quick decisions and judgments based on what we are observing, particularly as we are driving. We see maybe a truck ahead of us, it's raining, and maybe this truck looks like it's going into a skid, so we make a rapid decision to let off the gas and fall further behind the truck because we think it may actually jackknife or swerve over into our lane. Response times become much slower, and this is also a real concern because it can be everything from hesitating in intersections to going through red lights, or light goes green and a person in front of you doesn't proceed. And so we're seeing just slow response times. And then just errors at intersections, because again, we have to take in a lot of information in a very short period of time to make decisions as to how we proceed, what's appropriate, what is lawful, legal and lawful, what are the signals saying, being at an intersection that doesn't have a turn light and remembering to, before you proceed, to look to the left and to the right to see is there traffic coming at a high rate of speed that's going to potentially collide with us. So these are all the things to keep an eye out for in terms of unsafe driving. We'll go to the next one. And here's some additional ones. So when people are starting to park inappropriately, and I'm not talking about the people with their brand new cars of whatever model it is that maybe park across 2 parking stalls because they want to make sure nobody can hit their car. I'm talking about people who are not really aware they're parking inappropriately, and so they may be over the line, or they may be too close to another vehicle, or even just watching how people are attempting to park, and sometimes we can see people are having a bad time, you know, using the visual information and translating that as to, you know, how I maneuver the car, the wheel, to park, you know, in a reasonable manner. So people are having difficulty with that. When we start hearing about near misses or close calls, that is something to be on the alert for. And sometimes people are reporting that, self-reporting that, and sometimes they aren't. So we have to kind of keep our eye on that one, because some of the near misses or close calls might go to the previous point, which is new dings or scratches. If people are not self-reporting it to the rest of the family, we might be noticing new dings or scratches on the vehicle, or on the garage door, or inside the garage on a wall, or whatever it might be, where folks are having difficulty with, again, the maneuvering of the vehicle. When we have other drivers honking their horns at us, that's usually a sign that something's going on. We're probably doing something wrong. It's not, you know, we don't regularly honk our horns as we are driving here in Southern California. It is something you do see in other places, other countries, where it's just a constant honk, 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 and that's how everyone communicates with one another on the road. Everything from, you know, you're a terrible driver to get out of my way, that kind of stuff. But we don't do that here in Southern California. So if we're getting honked at, it's probably for a reason, and we need to either figure out what that reason is, or have somebody else tell us what they think the reason for the honking is about. We see people forgetting how to locate familiar places. So, you know, we all know our own neighborhoods, our own area of town that we live in. And we've got our, you know, places that we go for groceries or to the doctor's office or wherever it is. And usually we can just go without even kind of thinking and navigate our way to these locations. For people with dementia, they're starting to have trouble with that. And so they might zoom right by the grocery store and be continuing on down the road, thinking they're going to go to a different grocery store that in fact may be closed several years ago. When people are starting to return from a routine drive later than usual and don't seem able to describe what they were doing or what happened in that passage of time, that would be something to be very aware of. And, you know, I've actually seen that with some families I've worked with, where I'm thinking about one gentleman who was still driving, and he went out to, I think, I don't remember, it was the drugstore or something like that. Should have been no more than a half-hour trip. And he ended up gone for 4 or 5 hours. His wife was really concerned and had, you know, called 911, and everybody was on the alert to see where he was. Excuse me, my voice is going. And he eventually, you know, returned home, but he couldn't say where he was during that time because he couldn't remember. And so, you know, that he got home safely was kind of a stroke of luck in a sense, because it could have been that he could have remained disoriented and lost, and in fact, you know, first responders would be out there looking for him. So these are some of the things to keep an eye out for unsafe driving. The next slide, let's see if I can get my voice working again. I want to mention wandering because we know that people with dementia are at risk for wandering, and the majority of them will wander and become lost at some point in time during the disease progression. And of course, this can happen on foot or by vehicle, and it could be just a short distance in your neighborhood, or it could be a long distance. And I'll give you an example here shortly. Wandering, the causes of wandering can be disorientation or confusion. Again, you're in your own neighborhood, but you're confused. You don't remember this store being over here. You're looking for another store that used to be there, and you're just getting all, confused and befuddled as to where you are and where to find the place that you want to go to. It could be memories of past activities. In other words, a person might be saying to themselves, and we've had, again, families we've worked with where this is exactly what has happened, where the person with dementia thinks they're still working, even though they've maybe been retired for many, many years. And so they're fussing that they need to get going to work and that they're going to be late for work. And so they're hopping in the car and driving as if they would go to work, and or that's what they're telling their family member they're going to do. Sometimes it's physical needs or discomfort that results in wandering behavior. So if a person is hungry or wants to pick up a hamburger, they might, again, hop in the car and think they'll just drive down to the McDonald's down at the end of the, one of the main intersections in that neighborhood. And it can also just be agitation or restlessness, which people with dementia continue to experience just as the rest of us do at different times during our days and during, weeks and during different things that we're doing. So, and then we have over in the bubbles on the left side, again, we hear this from families. I always say if I had a nickel for every time I heard this, I'd have a lot of money. That, oh, my husband, we've lived in this neighborhood for years and years and years. He knows his way around here. Or I make sure she tells me where she's going. Well, people do become disoriented in familiar places, and they do forget how to navigate and get themselves home safe, to get anywhere safely. And sure, my mom might tell me where she's going, but she's got dementia, and that involves memory loss. And so she might forget that that's where she said she was going to go. And so she's driving along and she just keeps going. She just keeps driving. And I'm going to give you an example. I remember this so clearly because it was very distressing for the family and the wife, who was the primary caregiver in particular. This couple lived in Oceanside, had a condo up there. And one morning she got up and her husband was gone and the car was gone. And so, she looked around the condo and whatever, called the kids and let some neighbors know, and people were kind of on the lookout for her husband. They couldn't find him though. So they called 911, they called the police and reported him as being missing. The car is gone and he's a person with dementia. And long story short, he was gone, if I remember correctly, it was over 24 hours. But in the end, what happened was apparently he drove across the border into Tijuana and got in some kind of motor vehicle accident and exited the car and appeared confused and disoriented. And a good Samaritan happened to see the gentleman and said to themselves, gosh, this guy looks like he needs some help. And so when they talked, the Good Samaritan talked to the gentleman, he clearly was disoriented and couldn't really give any information about where he lived or what had happened. So the Good Samaritan actually took the gentleman to Border Patrol, to, you know, the entry to the United States, and kind of turned him over to those folks, and they were able to find out who he was. And, you know, eventually they got him, so he was found and they got him home safe and sound. But just to illustrate, this guy drove from Oceanside all the way down into Tijuana. And I've actually had other family stories where a person has gone even further than that, out of state, on the road, thinking they're on a road trip or wherever it is, whatever their destination is, and they just keep going. I've also seen this happen with people on buses too. So wandering is a real concern, and wandering and driving together is very much something that can happen. Let's go to the next slide. So working with physicians in the DMV. So I'll just say there's a lot of misperceptions about how the whole process works, with doctors reporting it to the DMV, and how the DMV itself works. So let's talk about that a little bit. Next slide. But we'll start with this one because this is so true. And I firmly believe this. This is the humorist Dave Barry said, the one thing that unites all human beings, regardless of age, gender, religion, economic status, or ethnic background, is that deep down inside, we all believe that we are above average drivers. It's always the other guys who are the lousy drivers, right? And we have to kind of remind ourselves of that. So let's go to the next slide. Working with the doctor. Now, when a person is diagnosed with some type of dementia, the doctor is mandated to report that to the DMV. And actually where the report goes, first of all, is the Department of Public Health in that area. And then the information is forwarded to the DMV. But each report that a physician sends in about a patient with dementia is very unique. It's the decision by the DMV to do something about it or not do something about it is very dependent on that report. And it's important to remember that the determining factor is not the diagnosis itself, but rather the individual driving ability of that person. And so, in other words, a doctor could send in a report that says, I have a patient just diagnosed with dementia. And that might be all the report says. And so the DMV looks at that and they say, okay, so they look at the person's driving record. Maybe it's been really good. There's no tickets, there's no accidents, anything going on. And maybe the person's driver's license is due to be renewed in a couple of years. Well, the DMV might not do anything with this and leave the person alone to continue driving. What is helpful in these physician reports is when that get sent to the DMV is when physicians give a little bit more details. So a physician could write, my patient has been diagnosed with dementia. It is early Alzheimer's, and I recommend they are still safe to drive. And so again, that would be something the DMV would look at. Now again, they're going to corroborate that to the best of their ability with the information they have, looking at your driving record and so forth. But all of this is to say that I want to dispel the notion that as soon as the doctor diagnoses dementia and sends that into the DMV, that right away we're going to lose our driver's license, because that's not the case. So it's important to discuss it with the doctor. So, you know, ask the doctor, what are they going to report to the DMV? Sometimes you can get come to an agreement with the doctor and then through the DMV to have a restricted driver's license. So maybe where you just drive in your own neighborhood, or you agree not to drive at night or on the freeways. The other thing is you can work with your doctor to get, well, in this example, orders or prescriptions regarding driving, in which case what we're talking about is asking a doctor to write a prescription for my mom that says, Dr. Jones, recommend my patient, Catherine, only drives in the daytime in her own neighborhood, and sign it. And sometimes that can be enough to dissuade a person from driving. Now, remember, people have memory loss with dementia. So maybe the doctor said, you really need to limit your driving. But if you don't remember that information, you go hop in the car and think you're going to go all over the place driving and doing chores and such. If you can have that presented to you by a care partner that says, no, you need to limit your driving, that can be enough and convincing to dissuade people from driving. So that's another way to kind of navigate when driving restrictions are starting to be imposed on a person, and or you're moving towards the giving up the license. The other thing to think about is insurance considerations. And I always have said, and this is from from talking with professionals that work in this area, is that if a doctor has recommended that the person with dementia does not drive, is no longer safe to drive, please listen to that and take it very seriously. Because if there is an accident, and God forbid if it's something that involves a fatality, families are opening themselves up to lawsuits, to all sorts of liability, where insurance might not step in and provide coverage, where things can really go south very quickly. So please pay attention to that and, follow the recommendations that are being given to you. All right, let's go to the next slide. So the DMV. So I hope how I've explained it is mostly clear. Again, just understanding that it's really a case-by-case basis based on the information that is sent to the DMV and what the driving record looks like. So, and within the DMV, there's all sorts of other options. So obviously, people can have written and driving tests. And, they do check the eyes as well too, vision. But you can request re-examination. So a care partner or a concerned individual worried about somebody's driving can make a request to the DMV that this person be re-examined to see if they are safe to continue driving. And a doctor might recommend that, but oftentimes it's family members themselves who are pursuing the request for re-examination. These areas of driver safety are governed through a particular office of driver safety within the DMV. And all sorts of things can happen there. So you might, if a person has their license revoked, you might request an administrative hearing where you can go and hear the reasonings behind the decision to revoke a license, and where you could potentially fight against it. And I have worked with clients who have in fact done that. You can also pursue, again, these restricted driver's licenses, where it will literally say on the driver's license, restricted to daytime driving in the neighborhood of Mira Mesa. And that can be helpful in kind of, again, starting to pare down the driving, starting to reduce the driving. The DMV can revoke driver's licenses, and the other entity that can do that is law enforcement. So if there was an accident of some kind and the person who caused the accident appears to have dementia and is confused or, you know, acting strangely or exhibiting behaviors, that the law, whoever the officers are, if it's CHP or San Diego PD or any other PD, law officers can revoke a driver's license, permission to drive. And having said all this, please know that there is a senior ombudsman within the DMV, within the Office of Driver Safety, that is somebody who works on behalf of senior drivers and whose intent is to be an ally and an advocate. And so, you know, if you have questions or problems, or you're not happy with the reasoning you've been given for why your license has been revoked, you can contact the senior ombudsman to get more information and to connect with somebody who's an advocate. I'll tell you just a quick story about a gentleman I worked with whose driver's license was revoked. And he had dementia, and he decided to fight it. And so he requested administrative hearings, and the hearings did not go in his favor. And so he went back to the senior ombudsman. Long story short, the agreement that was made was that he would go to he would go through a driver safety program with a certified instructor who is, you know, somebody who will give the goods to the DMV, the truth as to the person's ability and to drive safely. And the certified examiner kept failing this gentleman that I worked with, that he didn't pass, but he kept going back for these driver's lessons with this guy. And that continued on. He never did gain his driver's license back, but he did obtain some degree of satisfaction in just continuing working with this driver examiner, and thinking in his own mind, the gentleman with dementia, that he was taking steps to move forward to regain his license. It didn't happen, but just to let you know that it is a possibility. So, all right, next slide. So here we are, driver evaluations. So there's rehabilitation departments and occupational therapists who can do these types of driver evaluations. And it can be helpful just even a person who's just aging. You know, our movement changes with age, we get stiffer, we have less ability to, you know, look really well over our shoulders, our vision changes, etc. We may be sitting too low in the vehicle. The seat needs to be raised up, or we need to get, you know, some kind of booster seat. These are really good professionals to advise as regards that. And then we have, which is the expert I was referring to in that story I just told you, these certified driver rehabilitation specialists. And, you know, they will work with the person like this guy did with my gentleman with dementia. And again, my fella never did get his driver's license, didn't gain it back, didn't have it reinstated. But, you know, the driver rehabilitation specialist was a good guy. He worked really well with my gentleman. He was kind, but truthful. So in the end, it worked out. And of course, we have the on-the-road driving evaluation by DMV personnel trained that we can go through as well too. And you know, and some people do end up doing that. They get called in, and the driver's re-examination is recommended, and in fact is a requirement in order to potentially keep the driver's license. And so that we have to, go on the road with the DMV people and they assess our driving. So we'll go to the next one. So here, when it gets to a point that an individual is posing a risk to themselves or others, we have to do something. They must stop driving. And sometimes that means we have to step in to make that happen. And that's not a situation any of us wants to be in, but sometimes it's where we have to go. And I can tell you through all my years of doing this work, I've certainly worked with some families who had a heck of a time getting the person with dementia to stop driving. But all the families I worked with achieved it, and it didn't break the family apart. So sometimes we just have to live with having people be angry with us for, in this case, ensuring that they are no longer driving. And what we have found through the course of our work at Alzheimer's San Diego is most people with dementia who are angry about having their driver's license revoked and having the car taken away from them, they get over it. And in fact, oftentimes they forget that that was really important to them, and they forget kind of about that part of driving and how angry they were at losing that privilege. So the next slide. So some of the things we can do both for ourselves and, for people, families that we work, families that have somebody in the family with dementia, is we start to practice being a passenger. And by doing that, we are starting to restrict driving. A good example here was a gentleman who was very reluctant to give up driving. He wasn't very happy about it. And the family struck a deal with him. They said that the grandson was just learning to drive, and so he needed more time in the car with an adult, a licensed adult, to supervise him. And they asked the grandfather if he would do that, and he said yes. Now, never mind, the grandson already had his driver's license, but this was the deal the family came up with, and obviously the grandson was agreeable to it as well. And so he would go over to the grandparents' place and he'd say, "Grandpa, I need to practice driving, so you be my passenger today." So that's how they kind of started down that road of reducing the need to drive and restricting driving. It is important, though, to build sources of social support. Giving up driving has a lot of meanings for us, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And I guess one of our catchphrases that we use at Alzheimer's San Diego is you can't take something away without giving something in return. So when we're talking about giving up driving and what that means in the bigger picture of what we're giving up, we need to be able to offer other options for transportation, other supports, agreements, family contracts, whatever it might be. We need to do some research and have some plans in place to say, yes, Mom, we're at a point now, we need to have you no longer driving, and this is the plan and the options we've come up with so that you can still stay as independent as possible. And that usually goes over better than to just say, that's it, no more driving. So think about that. Let's see the next slide. Yeah, so what does driving mean to you? And go ahead. So all these things, I think independence is the number one thing that we would all say, but freedom is part of that too. Autonomy, it's, we closely identify with it as a part of our identity, especially here in Southern California. It gives us access to whatever it is we want or need to do. It gives us the ability to do those things easily. And it certainly is a symbol of, our adulthood and, again, our autonomy. And to not have those things is difficult. To become dependent on others for transportation, to potentially have to tell them the reasons for our trips. Maybe I like to drive to my local grocery store and buy a big thing of chocolate chip ice cream, and I come home and I eat it all. Nobody knows about this little secret of mine. And then I have my driver's license revoked and I still want to go get my ice cream, but now I have to disclose some of that secret. Even if I just say to my daughter, I need you to take me to the grocery store. She might come in the grocery store with me, or she might say, well, what do you need? Maybe I can pick it up for you. So, I'm losing some privacy there too. So let's see what the next slide is. So acknowledge these fears. So let's see, here we go. Loss of privacy, burden. Don't we all say we don't want to be a burden on, our family members? We become isolated, means our responsibilities have changed. There's a loss of control about this. It doesn't feel good. So for sure, we need to acknowledge these fears that people have and, show that we have empathy for it, that we get it, that we understand. And again, to have a plan to say, these are the things we're going to put in place and look at in order for you to continue to be as independent as possible. So let's look at the next slide. So as you're preparing for this momentous decision, consider the meaning of driving to a person and their fears. It can be helpful to keep a written record of observations, because sometimes that's information that then we need to relay to the doctor, and or it's information that we need to give to the person with dementia, but not in a, oh, you drove terribly this day and you almost hit a person, but rather to just be kind of more factual in order to support our assertion that the person should no longer be driving. So, not to point at them and say, no, you're a bad driver, but rather to say, I've noticed that, you tend to hit the curb when you're going around the corner and whatever else it might be. Again, do your research, look at what is out there. In terms of evaluation resources, transportation alternatives, and for sure get support, including professional assistance when needed. And part of that means contacting Alzheimer's San Diego and or ElderHelp. We've got people on staff who are very schooled in this. They have access to all sorts of information and resources that can assist you, and they can also help you problem solve this situation of how do we, move towards mom not driving. What do we say to her? How do we go about this? So we can help with that. Next slide. So again, we come back to this statement, and it's true. Personal and public safety is more important than any one person's emotional state. So regardless, if a person gets angry and upset and just very, very about this whole thing, I'm going to get that they have to give up their driver's license. Community safety and individual safety supersedes, a preference. If the person is saying, no way, I'm going to continue driving, and sometimes we have to, take the hard position and say, no, you aren't, because your safety and the safety of the community and the public is the most important factor in all this. So next slide.
Jane, I'm just going to make sure that the slide is advancing because it looked like somebody had put in that it might not be, but you're seeing it on your end, right?
I see it now. So
Okay.
this is just kind of a summary of how we can, as family care partners, take action. Is, first, what I should have here at the very top is discuss with the doctor, find out what the doctor's going to say on the report to the DMV and what the doctor's opinion is based on where the person is at clinically in the course of the dementia progression. And if the doctor says, oh, I think he's fine to continue driving, then we're not too certain about that as a family care partner, know that we can request that re-examination from the DMV. And sometimes we have to start controlling access to the car and the keys. And sometimes we have to up the ante and disable or remove the car. If necessary, contact law enforcement. Just as we wouldn't let a person who is drunk get in a car and drive, if we know that a person with dementia is an unsafe driver, we need to take action. We need to not allow them to drive. And yes, the last one is we have to plan transportation alternatives. And sometimes families have to go through all this. I think of a family I worked with some time ago. Was the gentleman with dementia, and he'd been driving since he was just a youngster, and driving was a part of his identity. And he was just, no way, I'm not going to give up driving. The doctor's report did recommend he no longer drive. So his license was revoked. And so the wife started to, took the keys away from him, and she would keep them in her purse. Well, this example absolutely illustrates how a diagnosis of dementia doesn't affect intelligence. So this fella, he would watch and see that his wife put the car keys in her purse. So he would just go in her purse and get the keys. So then she had to start, doing more things to really secure the keys. And he always managed to find the car keys and would get in the car and go drive. So the family decided they needed to disable the car. So they unplugged the battery, and he went out and the car wouldn't start. So he called AAA, and AAA came out and rehooked up the battery. They did a couple of other things like that, but he called a tow truck, or he called AAA again, or whatever it was. None of these things was working. So they moved the car from the driveway to around the corner on a different street, parking on the street. Well, when the car disappeared, he went looking for it, and he found it on the neighboring street. And so ultimately, this family did not have to contact law enforcement. What they did have to do was sell the car and look at transportation alternatives at that point for mom and dad, because they just couldn't have a car around, because dad was savvy enough to kind of figure out the go-arounds so that he could drive. So think about this in terms of your plan for taking action. Okay, next slide. So we'll take a quick look at local resources. So all sorts of alternatives for us. Of course, there are still taxis out around and about, mostly kind of more in the downtown core or like at the airport. But we have Uber and we have Lyft. That's, on demand driving. And certainly people do use Uber and Lyft on a regular basis. We have a paratransit program here in San Diego that people can register for and then begin to use. All sorts of nonprofit and volunteer programs available. And there are activity or location-specific transportation services. There's also private transportation services where you may, maybe it's a weekly thing. It's that you set up with a private service that comes once a week to take mom and dad to the grocery store or whatever it might be. And then of course we have family, friends, and other natural supports. And oftentimes people are using a combination of all of these things. And I'll give you, I think on the next slide, a good place to go to access this information. Well, first of all, for our paratransit program, it's the MTS Access ADA Paratransit. And there's the website for that, adaride.com. The next one is Facilitating Access to Transportation FACT Transit Database. This is a really good database that if you haven't ever heard of or gone to, do, factsd.org. And what you do is you just put in your zip code and it will provide you with an extensive list of all the different types of transportation options in your zip code area. And that's going to be everything from volunteer-based programs to, some of these other ones that you see listed. It's very comprehensive. You have to go through it because it will just kind of throw everything at you that's available in your zip code. So for example, there might be a volunteer transportation resource for women who are undergoing chemotherapy for breast cancer to get to their chemotherapy appointments. Well, that's very specific. That one's not going to apply for a person with dementia, but there will be others that do. And some of them are older drivers who are still driving, helping drivers who have either willingly given up driving or had their license revoked, where they can take them to doctor's appointments or to the grocery store, things like that. So it's a really, really good database. Have a look at that. Ride Fact is a general purpose option for general purpose trips for seniors 60 and above, 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And again, you'll get that information through factsd.org. And then there's through Jewish Family Services on the go. They have a couple of different programs that involves transportation options that you can have a look at there on the Jewish Family Services website. For driver safety information, you can go to the DMV and on the website you can get the request for driver re-examination. They have a good senior driver guide, and also this is where you'll find the information about the Ombudsman program. Now, when I last looked at it, there was just, unfortunately, just one senior ombudsman for Orange County, San Bernardino, and San Diego County. And so that's one person to cover a lot of territory. So just be aware of that. AARP has some great driver safety programs, as does AAA. And another one that's really good is the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. So have a look at that. They have just a whole wealth of information on that website, everything from, again, the signs to watch for with unsafe driving to, what are some strategies for reducing or the need to drive or restricting the ability to drive, access to a car. All sorts of good information and good supports for families. The next slide. There is Alzheimer's San Diego. And So you can call us and we can help you out with this area as well too, with support, with information, resources, problem solving, all sorts of other different things. And of course, beyond driving and dementia, with, we have access to all sorts of information. And this is what we're here for. All our programs and services are at no cost to the community. We are a local nonprofit, and we have people answering the phones Monday through Friday to give information and support and share resources. We do class webinars like this and in-person classes. We have over 30 support groups around the county. We've got a companion program where we have volunteers matched up with a person with dementia to act as a companion. Social activities and outings for people with dementia and their care partners. We offer memory screenings. We can tell you all about clinical trials here in San Diego. And we have also a volunteer-based program for people living alone in the community with memory loss. So that's all that we do. And of course, you have ElderHelp as well, and Carrie, to lean on with this issue of driving and dementia. And that's, again, what our organizations are here for. So, use us, absolutely use us. So that's what we have for today. So there's still some time for questions. I don't know if any questions have come in yet, Carrie.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Jean. That was a lot of helpful information. I love how you just describe all the different areas that can impact somebody's ability to drive, and then also how to navigate the DMV and conversations with the physician. Those are all very important pieces. So thank you for all of that. Just to let everybody know, I know I answered a couple of people separately, but we will be sharing a copy of these slides. So you will have the different resources that Jean shared and the slides to reference back. So I will share those after we're done here, as well as a link to the recording so that you have that as well and can share it with anybody who maybe wasn't able to attend. So just wanted to mention that.
I also have a link that I'll send to you, Carrie, that you might want to include in that. It's to a section in the DMV that's all about dementia and driving. And
that would be great.
Another good resource. So I'll send that to you and you can share that with everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, so I'll include that as well. And then we did have a couple of questions that came in. So let me just go to those real quick. So one was asking, what if your parent is resistant to stop driving due to perceived loss of independence, and the DMV just renewed their license for 5 years? So that's kind of one part. And then the second part of that is, how do you get the DMV to require a driving test when the license is not expired?
Yeah, that's where you would go in on their website and complete that Form 699 request for driver reexamination. So which then will require, it's not just, we all get our driver's license renewed pretty easily, right? But this is different because it will require the person to go to a DMV and kind of go through all those steps again that we all went through when we first got our driver's license. So they'll check the eyes, the person will have a written examination, and if the eyes are good and the written examination is good, they'll have a driving examination too on the road. So if the driver's license has been renewed for 5 years and the person has been diagnosed with some kind of dementia, that's probably the route that I would go. If they pass, then they're okay to drive. It's the DMV who's making that assessment and that judgment call. And in which case, then it's legal, it's fine. What I will say is the DMV will have it on record then that they did do a reexamination, and if the person passed, that's fine, but they'll likely be bringing that person in another year, if not sooner, to make sure they continue to be a safe driver.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for answering that. And then the next question is in regards to a couple of the services that you offer at Alzheimer's San Diego. So one is asking what is dementia coaching, and then also in regards to the ALS Companion program, if that is in person or virtual.
Good questions. Dementia coaching. Well, this is our team of clinical people, you know, social workers, masters, MSWs, and others as well too, who have access to this huge amount of information that we have compiled over the years, and you know, have good experience in working with families impacted by a diagnosis of dementia. So kind of whatever question or whatever problem or whatever you're looking for, call us, and that's where the dementia coaches, the clinical folks, will come in and share their information and expertise with you. If you're looking for a list of, let's just say, neurologists, you don't need to go Google that, neurologists in San Diego. Call us. We've got that list of neurologists who do specialize in memory disorders, okay? Because you want to get to the right kind of neurologist. If you want to know more about, for example, the transportation options that we've talked about here today, call and ask. We've got a list of transportation resources. We've got a tip sheet on how to, you know, start the process of stopping driving. If you're looking for adult day programs, we've got a list of that. And again, our clinical folks, you know, can also help with not just answering a question, but helping you to problem solve by meeting with you, maybe by Zoom or in person, to just kind of go more in depth into whatever the situation is that a family is experiencing. Our ALS Companion program, volunteer-based, so we train volunteers to go into the home for up to 4 hours a week as companions. And so they're spending time with the person with dementia. And certainly a large part of the intent with this is to give care partners a break. You know, if you want to go off and have lunch with your girlfriends, or you just want to have a big old bubble bath and then a nap in the afternoon, you can do that. But you know, they don't provide like personal care. So, and did I answer the question then? I'll tell you, ALS Companions is in person, but we have had Zoom relationships, you know, that formed during the pandemic, obviously, that have maintained as well too. But mostly it's in person now.
That's wonderful. Such a great service. So I definitely love that program. I think it's so important for people to know about. So thank you for sharing that. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to type them in. We have a couple more minutes. I did just want to say another thank you to US Bank for sponsoring today's webinar. We appreciate that. And then here is ElderHelp's contact information. If you would like to have our general information, I will also be sending the follow-up email that has Alzheimer's San Diego's website and their contact information, and then you'll have ElderHelp's as well. So lots of information coming your way after we end today's presentation. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So if you do have a question, feel free to reach out to one of our organizations, and we're happy to help connect you with resources and answer those questions. And we're so glad that you were able to join today's topic, and hopefully you found some good tips and tools in there. And we will be sending out information for future topics as well. So thank you so much for your time and joining, and thank you, Jean, for all of your expertise and sharing those resources.
And back at you, Carrie. Thanks for hosting us today, and it's always a pleasure.